Welcome to the Be Real Podcast. Bobby Maximus, Joe Cebula. And today we're going to talk about I'm going to say, Joe, this is the number one fitness goal on the entire planet. And it has been since fitness was invented thousands and thousands of years ago. And it's how to get a six-pack.
Yeah. I think everybody wants this. People will say they want to work out for health, but, everybody wants to look like chiseled out of stone. Come on.
People want abs, and if you have them, it's the number one physical compliment you will get.
Yeah.
Chances are, if you have abs, you have a sculpted chest, you have capped shoulders, you have some bicep veins, that's not what people are going to comment on. They're going to comment on your abs. And whenever I see a fitness magazine, whether it's a men's magazine or a women's magazine or aimed at both, it's all about how to get that six-pack. When you look at a Hollywood physique, that's what everybody comments on. This area right here, the stomach, that is the number one place where you can tell if somebody's put the hours in, if somebody's put the work in, if somebody's truly lean, their abs are going to show.
Yeah, there's a big difference between somebody who's just skinny and somebody who has abs too. So I want to draw that distinction.
For sure. So let's talk about it. You actually just had an experience on set. You were working on a movie where you had told me kind of offline that somebody was asking about how to get a six-pack.
Yeah, so part of it was just working on set is a really challenging environment because the hours are long. You're limited on your food choices to whatever, they're providing for free on the craft services table. If you're like, for example, if you're a keto or low carb and they decide they're going to order pizza for lunch, your options are to pick toppings off the pizza or starve. And just part of the conversation comes around to how do you manage? How do you manage when you're working in this environment? And part of the thing is just understanding the basic thermodynamics of losing weight or trying to stay lean, and understanding also when you have opportunities to try to make progress or make gains in your fitness and your performance, and times when you're just trying to sort of stay afloat and minimize damage. And so what we ended up talking about a lot was you just have to maintain a deficit. You just have to be in the place where you're not consuming as many calories as you're burning. And maybe because you're working 16-hour days, maybe because you're committed to a project. I did 2 short films here over the weekend. So it ended up being 5 days of just rapid fire shooting, long days, because there's just no room for error. We can't just add another day to this project. They're too low budget. There's too many moving parts. And so you get into this I have to work, I have to keep going, I have to keep going, I have to keep going. But a lot of the work is waiting for that next thing to come up, waiting for the lights to be ready, waiting for the actors to be ready. And so, maybe you can do some squats, maybe you can do some push-ups, but the one thing you absolutely can do is you can control what goes in your mouth.
Yep.
And that's kind of the magic thing all around. And whether you're looking to lean out because you're a bodybuilder going on a show, whether you're just looking to get from 50% body fat down to 30% body fat, wherever you are on this spectrum, it's about thermodynamics. It's about burning more energy than you're consuming. And my advice that I give to most of the people I work with ends up being about controlling what they can control. Can they control the food choices that they have? Can they control the amount they're eating? Can they screw with the equation a little bit to give them some more breathing room? And a lot of folks want to know, do you have to lift weights? Do you have to do fasted cardio? Do you have to do yoga? Do you have to eat vegan? Is the quality of food important? And the short answer is yes and no. If you want to look good, you got to lift weights. And that's what I said earlier. Skinny with no abs is just skinny. And nobody's going to look at you and say, boy, I want that. But when they see someone who's got definition, when they see someone who is athletic, that is very attractive. That is, and I would say this, especially now in this modern age, contemporarily, that's the look that people like. When you watch movies now, it's not just some dude who's lean or whatever. It's some dude who is fucking jacked.
Yeah, but it's also exceedingly more rare. Yeah. I would say, I think there was a point in the 40s or 50s where not a lot of people worked out, Joe. You didn't see a lot of jacked people walking around because it wasn't a thing.
That's why like Hollywood leading men, you can kind of tell they were strong, but they weren't bodybuilders. Yeah.
But that's why Arnold was such a big thing, right? Because he was like the first person, like really, not the first person to look like that, but certainly like walking around that really hit the mainstream. But people were in a lot better shape back then, too. People worked for a living. They gave physical labor. They had nice physiques. They looked good. Well, now you seem to have two groups. You have a very, 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 very small percentage of the population, the 1% of the 1%, that's got the abs and the shoulders and the pecs and looks like they've lifted a lot of weights. But then everybody else, like for lack of a better word, Joe, they're fat. They're overweight. Like you go to a public pool, you go to a mall, you go to a restaurant, you'll see what state this country and what, this world where people live. And it is rare. If you have a six pack, I look at it, the six pack is the ultimate status symbol.
Yeah.
You can go buy a watch, you can go buy a car, you can go buy a fancy house, you can buy a Gucci shirt, you can buy Gucci loafers or whatever you want to buy. You have to earn a six pack. And sure, maybe you could take Ozempic. Maybe you could hire a trainer. Maybe you can get a dietitian. But the reality is you still have to do the work in some way. And I see all kinds of rich people, and getting the six pack has eluded them. And again, it's the ultimate status symbol because it's just living proof. When you look at somebody with a six pack, they've put in the work. They've put in the effort. They've had some pain, some suffering. They went through a fire to get it. And that's the reality.
And you said it too. It is a status symbol because you'll see rich guys with a Rolex. You'll see rich guys driving a Ferrari, right? The one thing they can't just purchase is that. There's no shortcut to it. And that's how you know that's true. Because people will say, like, oh, these Hollywood actors, they know the secret, the Hollywood secret or whatever. And it's like, if it was that easy, like, Jeff Bezos would be the most jacked dude on the planet.
Well, never mind him, Joe. Oprah Winfrey. One of the richest people on the planet. Not ripped. Kevin James, comedian. Not ripped. And has been actually public with his struggles with weight gain and weight loss and stuff like that. Not ripped. And a guy, he trained with Boss Rutan. He's clearly interested in physical fitness to some degree, and these people aren't walking around shredded despite the fact they have the budget to get the best trainer, to eat the best
food. Think about this too, to go back to working on set, because we're talking about the rarity of those six-pack abs. If you look at a film crew, nobody in their mind pictures a bunch of really fit jack people. You know what I mean? You think about the guy holding the boom pole. You think about the makeup artist, the hair artist. You think about all the technicians, the grips, the lighting guys, the director. Like, you're kind of just picturing normal, average people, right? But when you think of leading actor, there's only one of those on an entire crew. You might have a shoot with 300 people working on one day, and only one dude in that room is jacked, and he's the star of the movie.
That's it.
That's how rare it is.
Even back to it, Joe, when you start naming actors, when you start naming, like, leading men and who has a good physique and who doesn't, for every Henry Cavill, for every Frank Grillo, for every Rock, for every Jason Statham, there's also a Kevin James.
Yeah.
There's also Liam Neeson, who isn't in horrible shape by any means, but he's not jacked and shredded. You have a Denzel Washington.
Maybe he is under his Jedi robe, and we just never got to see it. That's not his selling point.
Samuel L. Jackson, not jacked and shredded. Like, there's a lot of people, and I would assume that if they wanted to look like that, they could. It's that. Or I shouldn't say wanted. That's the wrong terminology. If someone went to Samuel L. Jackson and said, hey, I'm going to push a button and make you get ripped. Do you want me to push the button? He's going to say, yes, motherfucker. Like,
I was going to say, we all know how that's going to go.
But that's what he's going to say. The reality is getting fit, getting shredded, getting jacked is a lot harder than people think, and it doesn't come down to money. So we were throwing around some titles for this podcast, and one of the things we threw around is you'll never get a six-pack. It's kind of a hook. You'll never get a six-pack if you don't understand these methods. And this is a perfect time, and I think there's one method that you need to understand. Listen, if you've followed us, you know our deal. We want you to eat healthy, nutrient-dense, non-processed food. You got to do that. You got to work out. You got to sleep more. We say these things almost every single podcast. We're not going to cover that right now. The one thing that you need to understand if you want a six-pack, you have to develop a really good and solid marriage with pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Because it's going to hurt. It's going to take some restriction. It's going to take some willpower. It's going to take some dedication. And honestly, depending on what your definition of fun is, it's probably not going to be fun.
Yep.
That's it. Right? And think about
and how long have I waffled about, like, I wanted to get bigger. After I did my major transformation, I wanted to, like, beef up my shoulders. I wanted to beef up my chest. And how long have I waffled on okay, I gotta get smaller because I know what that feels like. I know how hard that is, what you have to give up, the cost, the pain. Yeah.
Let's go over the pain points, Joe, on a day-to-day basis. And again, I want to reiterate, having a six-pack is the ultimate status symbol because you can't just buy it. Yeah. You have to work for it. And again, you can buy the nutritionist. You can buy the trainer. You can go on Ozempic. You can do whatever. You still have to do the work. And here's where the pain point is. It's when Tuesday you're on set and someone buys the best donuts in Minneapolis, your hometown, and you're not allowed to have one. And then Wednesday, it's your daughter's birthday. And she's having a cake and she says, Daddy, can you please have a piece of cake? And then Thursday, your friend wants to go to Buffalo Wild Wings to watch the football game and you haven't seen him in a while and you want to go watch the football game. And so you're sitting there and people are having lemon habanero wings. They're having lemon pepper wings. They're having barbecue wings, buffalo wings, and you're eating a piece of celery. And then Friday night, Joe, it's your Dungeons and Dragons game night. And someone breaks out a really expensive, really fine, a really aged bottle of scotch. And you're not allowed to indulge. And then on the weekend, you're visiting your good friend Bobby Maximus in Salt Lake City. And he wants to go to Pretty Bird. Pretty Bird being the best chicken sandwich on the planet.
Hold on. Can we pause for just a second because we're not affiliated with Pretty Bird. Like, we know Viet, we're friends, but like he doesn't pay us for this. But if you're in the Salt Lake area and you don't go to Pretty Bird, you are freaking missing out.
Yeah. But guess what you have to do, Joe? You have to say no to that. When you when you have a long day at work, when you're on set all day and you're starved and you come home and your tummy is rumbling, you got to go to bed hungry.
Yeah.
Like that's a reality. You got to be hungry all the time. You talked about creating a deficit. You're going to be hungry. It's going to suck. You're going to feel pain. There's going to be suffering.
And we talked about this a lot too, of like, there's this convenience factor of it. There's this like, I don't want to have to think about it. I don't want to have to prep my meals. I really like the idea that I can just go to the cabinet, grab food and eat it. I can just go out to a restaurant, order food and have them bring it to me. And you have to cut that off. Food is no longer something that you do for pleasure, at least not in this short term, at least not during this transformation. And it's not to say there's no room at all ever, but you got to get it in your mind that you are only fueling your body, and your body doesn't need a piece of cake. Your body doesn't need a milkshake. Your body needs specific nutrients, and that's what it's allowed to have. And you have to be willing to give everything up for it. And you start feeling like, well, what's wrong with me that I'm different than everyone else? And it's like, because you're trying to be different than everyone else. You are not now eating to stay alive. You are eating to change. You are eating for a purpose. And that is very difficult to stay in that vein for a long time.
Well, here's a pain point that you and I have experienced together. I'm lean right now. I just got my DEXA back. I'm 10.8% body fat. At some point, I already created the deficit. I went through that pain point period. You and I are in Austin, Texas. We're out for dinner. We're at a fine barbecue spot. You're trying to get lean. You have to create a deficit of, I'm going to say 50,000 calories, 70,000 calories, 100,000 calories. Yep. Your credit card is maxed out. Mine's not. I can sit there and I can cheat. I can have the waffle cut fries. I can have the brisket. I can have the burger with the bun. And you've got to order a salad. That's not fun for you.
Right.
And the mistake that people make, they look at me and say, well, Bobby eats this. I can eat that. No, because you have to create a deficit. I use a credit card analogy. My credit card's got a zero balance. I can swipe that thing and put some money on it. You can't. And that's where the pain point is. When I go, I've actually training a guy in the gym right now. He came in, he was 315 pounds, Joe. He's an ex-NFL guy. And he's dropped to about 270, 265, 266, 270, 267, 273. He's always around that mark. It's his year anniversary training with me, and we took him in for a DEXA, and he's at 18%. He really wants to be under 15. And I just said, Ryan, you're going to have to suffer for a little bit. You're going to have to say no to the pancakes. You're going to have to say no to the cake. You're going to have to say no. And there's always something that comes up that tempts him. His wife's birthday, his kid's party, someone has a snack. There's an event on the weekend. There's barbecues. And I'm like, listen, you're just going to have to bite the bullet for 3 months. Like you're in the no fun zone. Now, once you get there, you can have fun again. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. Once you're there and you've created the deficit, you're not just going to put it back overnight. Now, can you eat like a slob? No, but you can have the cheat every now and then. But while you're doing it, man, you're on what I call the pain patrol. You're on suffering street. Like you are hungry all the time and you are doing without.
The credit card analogy is so good because if you've got a credit card with like keep the math easy, $1,000 limit on it, and you're at $999, like you can't buy shit on that credit card. You've got no room to move, and you have to pay the interest fees every month, yada yada yada. Right? You might end up paying back more than you ended up spending on the card because you got to pay the credit card company for the privilege of using their card. But if you have zero balance, and you go out and you buy a cup of coffee the first Monday of the month, and then when that bill comes due, you pay it, you're back to zero balance. You go out, you spend $500 on that credit card, and then you put $500 cash back in, you're back at zero balance. You've got room to wiggle. You've got resources to work with. And again, if you're maxed out, if you're over the limit, you just have no option. You've got to tighten that belt, and you got to do without for a while until that balance gets back down.
So this is getting a little esoteric. So I want to give people a real life example with real numbers that you can't confuse, okay? Mm-hmm. So let's compare me and my client Ryan, my athlete Ryan. He played in the NFL. I fought in the UFC. We're the same height, Joe, and we're roughly the same build. Like he's heavier than me. I woke up at 240 today. He's waking up at 270, but I'm also 10% body fat. He's 18% body fat. So say Ryan wants to be like me. He's 18% body fat at 270 pounds. So for him to get down to 10% body fat, he's got to lose 8% of his body weight. So 270 times 0.08, he's got to lose, and I got my calculator out here, he's got to lose 21.6 pounds of fat. Remind me, how many calories are in a pound of fat?
We use 3,500.
Okay, so times 3,500. He has got to somehow create a deficit of 75,600 calories. Mm-hmm. That's a massive deficit, Joe. A massive deficit to create. Now,
here's my math. If he was 500 calories a day in a deficit, that's 151.2 days that he's got to maintain.
Okay. Now it works the other way, and here's where I get the suffering, and people can eat different, and it's not the same for everybody. For me to get as fat as him, and he's not that fat, like 18%, 270 pounds, he looks pretty good. Like he's done really well. I'm not trying to rip on the guy. But I have a 75,000 calorie head start, and this is the point. He's got to create a deficit. I don't. So you know what I can do, Joe? I can go for that 1,000 calories in McDonald's. I can go to that CM Smokehouse we were in Austin, and I can have the 2,000 calorie meal, and I can work that off in a week. How long did you say he has to spend working that off at a 500 calorie deficit? 151 days. I can go for that 2,000 calorie meal, and then for the next 4 days, I'm in a 500 calorie deficit, and I can get rid of it in 4 days. Like, that's what people don't understand. And when you have to create this 75,000 calorie deficit, day one's not going to be hard. Day two's not going to be hard. Day three's not going to be hard. But you hit that Thursday night Buffalo Wild Wings football game, you hit that Friday night treat, you hit that Saturday birthday party, you hit that Sunday brunch with your family, at your church, wherever you go, and you go over the deficit, we'll add another day to the total. So here's how this works.
Day. 2,000 calories is what, 4 more days?
4 days. So you just keep, like you talked about this during one of our earlier podcasts. I can't remember what episode it was, but yeah, it's 151 days if you are perfect creating that 500 calorie deficit.
Yeah, you mentioned now you had his year anniversary. So let's say he goes out for a 2,000 calorie meal to celebrate. He just added 4 more days to his total.
And that's what makes this hard. And that's what I say the thing you have to understand is you have to have a really good relationship with suffering, a really good relationship with pain, a really good relationship with restraint, really good relationship.
Too. You're hungry, you're tired, you're emotional, you feel like you've been fighting an uphill battle. You're going to be weak. All you're going to want is convenience. All you're going to want is comfort food. And every time you give into that, you're adding not just 1, but multiple days to that long total.
And it is easier, and I've said this a million times, it is easier to say no. It is easier to restrict yourself when food is plentiful or when you can go do the thing whenever you want. Let me give you an example, Joe. There have been periods of my life where I haven't had an alcohol beverage for a year. There have been periods of my life where I haven't had a piece of cake for a year. Not because I was dieting, not because I was trying to restrict, just because I didn't feel like it. It was so easy to say no. I remember I was preparing for a fight in 2006. It was a fight I ended up winning. I won submission of the night. I got a big check from Uncle Dana in the UFC. It's pretty cool to say Dana White used to be my boss. I got interviewed by Joe Rogan. One of the best moments of my life. But it was funny that year. The fight was in June. In January and February, I wasn't having a drink just because I didn't feel like it. In January and February, I wasn't having the dessert when I went to go out and eat just because I didn't feel like it. When I started training camp for that fight, and you're looking at March, April, and May, and like part of June leading up to the fight, when I wasn't allowed to have the drink, something switched in my mind. I really wanted the drink. When I wasn't allowed to have the dessert, I really wanted the dessert. It's like there's a phrase for this, and I'm going to butcher it, but like it has to do with Adam and Eve, Joe. It's the fruit from the forbidden tree.
Yeah.
When you're not allowed to have it, it becomes that much harder to say no. If you come to visit me in Salt Lake, and I'm like, Joe, do you want to go to Pretty Bird? And you're like, I'm not really hungry. Let's save it till tomorrow. It's easy to say no. Mm-hmm. When you're on a diet and you can't eat it, and you know you can't eat it for another 3 or 4 months, you want it.
Yeah.
It's why, and there's a thing, and it's really sad. There's some literature out there to back this, that people go after married people. Why? Because they're unavailable. It's the fruit of the forbidden tree. People like to gamble. People like to drink. Why? Because it's naughty. If you grew up in a household where you were never allowed a soda, the minute you get your lunch money, what are you buying, Joe? Soda. Like you're going for the thing. The parents, at least where I grew up, the parents that restricted alcohol the most, the parents that were hardest on their kids when those kids got to university, they were raging alcoholics.
Yeah, the
Because
preacher
it was
kids
all
are always the wild
present.
ones.
They couldn't say no. There was 2 private school kids I went to school with that literally just drank and smoked weed all year. Come to find out, they had really strict, wealthy parents, and they went to a boarding school their whole lives.
Yeah.
Now the gloves were off. It was go time. And so that's where this gets really, really hard, is you've got to restrict. You can't say yes. You have to say no. You can't slip up. Every time you slip up, you're filled with feelings of guilt and shame and misery. And you feel like, I'm going to use an analogy no one's going to know, but Sisyphus rolling up. It's a Greek mythology thing. He's got a big rock. His punishment from Zeus is he rolls the rock to the top of the hill. It falls down. He's got to do it all again. When you're caught on that treadmill, Joe, it is not easy to get out of it. But
Nope.
that's what you have to do. You have to embrace the pain. You have to embrace the suffering. When pain comes to your front door and knocks, you got to invite that dude in and sit it down and have a lunch with it. Like that's just where you're at. And I wish I could tell you there was another way. I wish I could tell you you could just hack your macros. I wish I could tell you you could just do this secret workout that's going to make all your workout dreams come true. I wish I could tell you there was some injection you could take, or there was something that would do the work for you, but it doesn't work like that. Like even Ozempic, yes, will it help you lose weight? Sure, but it also comes with a lot of nasty side effects, and it's not going to build the musculature you're looking for. Because my understanding is Ozempic eats everything. It's why people get that Ozempic face. It starts to eat away your muscle. You're still not going to get that six-pack you want. And again, that's why people look at Henry Cavill. They look at Chris Hemsworth. They look at The Rock. They look at Jason Statham. They marvel at these people because guess what? They had to do the work.
Yep.
That's it.
They're not the funnest people to party with, to be fair.
Nope.
You know what I mean? Like if you know friends who've been going through cuts to go to bodybuilding shows, bikini competitors, stuff like that, they're just no fun to hang out with. Because you can't do any of that stuff. You can't drink. You can't order fun food. It's not about the socializing. You know, they got to have their little meal in their Tupperware container because they've got to stay focused because they can't afford those extra couple of days right before a photo shoot or what have you. And so, yeah, you've got to be able to give up a lot of that stuff, and you've got to be pretty freaking okay with it.
I used to work with a guy named Vic, who was a bodybuilder when I was a cop. And as a cop in Toronto in 2006, you got deals at all kinds of restaurants, Joe. Sometimes it was free pizza. Sometimes it was free shawarma. Sometimes it was free burgers. McDonald's on the lakeshore in Mississauga gave cops free McDonald's all the time.
Coffee. I used to get free coffee when I was in my uniform.
Yep. So when you're riding with Vic, you're eating there's this place called Swiss Chalet in Canada. It's got chicken, it's got French fries, it's got this Swiss Chalet sauce. It's phenomenal. You're eating your Swiss Chalet dinner that you got given to you for free. And he's sitting there, Joe, again, with his Tupperware container, eating cold sweet potato and plain chicken breast without salt because he can't afford any water retention. Like and imagine sitting with your partner in a car and the smell of that rotisserie chicken, the smell of the French fries. You roll up to the drive-through window at McDonald's like, oh, officer, let us cook some fresh fries for you. And you got to smell that when you're munching on a plain, dry, unseasoned chicken breast. Like I'm telling you, it's hard. So that's all I want you to do. If you're watching this, just develop a real good relationship with some pain, some suffering, a little bit of anguish, a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of resentment, and then you'll get your six-pack. That's all you got to do.
That's it. That's all you got to do.
And what's keeping you from this, Joe, right now? Because you went through an incredible transformation when you got shredded. I'm going to ask you a question, and you answer me honestly. Is part of the struggle you're facing right now the fact that you know the pain that it took. You know the suffering that it took. You know what an uphill battle it is.
Yeah, and I mean, when I look back at, I did a strict 12 weeks. I mean, hard. And I look back at that and it's like, I don't know that I can go through it again. I mean, it was almost traumatic because it was that hard. And did it work? Yeah, it worked great. I got amazing pictures from that. But this is where I've had this revelation. I don't have to do that again. Like, I'm not in the same place I was when I started that. And who says it has to happen in 12 weeks? I got how much every time? Exactly. And so I can kind of slow it down and I can get it to a point where it's like, it ain't that bad. And again, using, this past week in my life personally as an example, there were some tough days. There's some tough days working on some tough projects, being away from the family, not having 100% control. It wasn't that hard to just try to make a better choice. I will tell you this, yesterday, very depleted, very hungry. I had cut too deep the day before just because, again, just being distracted, working, too much coffee, and I'm sitting, I do sound mixing. So I'm sitting at my mixing board and I'm starting to nod off a little bit. And like all the caffeine in the world isn't helping right now. I've already had 5 cups of coffee and it's just not helping at this point. It's almost worse. You know what I mean? So I go over to the craft services table and there's not a lot of great choices right now. So I had a bag of just like one of those little bags of barbecue chips, and holy hell, suddenly I had energy. I had focus, and I was able to go for like another 4 hours without feeling like I was nodding off. And then we actually had a decent meal later. And so do I feel bad that I ate a bag of chips? It's like, if I could have had anything else, I probably would have chosen it. But that was a survival situation. That was like, I just need to be able to focus to get through this time. And I'm not upset. And guess what? I kind of did enjoy the fact that it was a bag of chips.
Well, and you can eat the chips. Here's the thing. It's the law of thermodynamics. We'll close out the podcast with that. You can do this eating Twinkies. You can do this eating donuts. You can do, there's actually a lot of studies. So there's 2 schools of thought, right? There's calories in, calories out. And then there's people that try to push it, your macros matter. And a lot of the literature has said that it doesn't matter what you eat. As long as you're in a calorie deficit, you will get leaner. Like this whole, the insulin resistance model, blah, 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 blah. It's been proven time and time again to be false. It's just keeping your calories low. Where I adjust the macros for my clients is what they're going to find easier. And in general, I think people find it easier when you restrict their carbs and restrict their fat, but there are some people that have a completely different mindset. And so some of my clients, Joe, were on a carb-restricted diet, and they love it. Some of them, they're on a fat-resistant diet. It's whatever's easier to create that deficit. But however you want to create the deficit, you can eat at Cheesecake Factory and do it. The hard part about eating at Cheesecake Factory is if you're only allowed 1,800 calories a day, you're eating 1 slice of cheesecake a day.
Well, yeah, and they're giving you a giant plate of food, and you can't eat all the food that's in front of you. And when you're hungry, when you're tired, when you're weak, when you're emotional, and somebody puts a giant plate of spaghetti in front of you, and you're only allowed to eat 1/4 of what's on that plate, and everyone else is still going, and you got this plate of spaghetti, plate of French fries, it's real easy to give in and start snacking.
And that's where food choice matters, because like a large bag of chips, call it 1,000 calories, you're still going to be starving. Yeah. And if that's all you're allowed, you're going to have a hard time. But theoretically, you can eat the chips. But Joe, back to the math. You got to create a 75,000 calorie deficit. So how many days you want to do it in? You want to do it in 90 days? 840 calories you got to cut a day. That's a big meal, Joe. That you're looking like a couple of Big Macs. Like that's big, right?
Yep.
75,000 calories. You want to do it in, what did you say, 6 months?
Yeah.
180 days? Well, now it's only a 416 calorie deficit. That's a little more manageable, right? But that's how it works. And the lower you get in body fat, the harder this gets.
Yeah, the closer you get to the goal. Yep.
You don't have the energy. So if you look at me, and I'm 10.8% right now, and I want to drop to 7 because I got a men's health cover shoot coming up. What did I say? Is that 3.8%?
Mm-hmm.
Times 240 pounds. I got to lose 9 pounds of fat times 3,500. Man, I got to create a 31,000 calorie deficit. That hurts, dude. If you tell me, what did I say, 31,000 calories? Bobby, you got a photo shoot in 6 weeks. So divided by how many days is that? 50 days? 48 days?
Say 42.
738 calories a day. Gone. Like, no more. I was just looking here. No more shakes.
My last thought on this whole thing, because I think it does put a lot of the rest of fitness advice into perspective. So if we've understand that the most important thing is that you have to have this deficit. You got to create this deficit. The less you're eating, the better the food should be. Not the better it has to be. The better it should be, because if you're only eating, let's just say you're only eating 1,500 calories a day to create this massive deficit, like you also want to make sure that you're not missing your vitamins, your minerals, and all the stuff that goes with it. And that's why we always say, nutrient dense food, not calorie dense, nutrient dense. Maintain your nutrient base. And know too that if you're in a deficit, your body's going to want to get more efficient. It's going to want to destroy muscle because muscle costs more than fat. So if you keep the protein relatively high, you're kind of telling your body it's okay to maintain that. It has what it needs, especially if you're doing resistance training. So all this other advice about, the chicken and broccoli, the specific kinds of workouts you do. Should I do cardio? Shouldn't I do cardio? Think of that all as just energy out. And what are the demands? Like, what does your body need? If you're trying to build muscle, you need nutrients, you need protein, you need those amino acids. Like, go out and get them. Choose that over the Twinkie diet, obviously. Because if all you do is eat Twinkies, like, you don't get to eat that many of them, number one. And then number two, you're going to have other problems because of nutrients that you're missing in that diet.
Yep.
Especially if you're on it for a long term.
For sure. You said one more thing I want to talk about.
All right.
You ever heard the phrase, you can't outwork a bad diet? You kind of can, depending how much work you're willing to do. Now, there are people on the internet who are going to hate what I'm about to say. The food freedom crowd. Yep. The people that say, I don't know who needs to hear this, but you don't need to earn your Thanksgiving dinner. In this context, you do. Mm-hmm. Because if you want to eat that 500 calories extra at Thanksgiving, you better find a way to burn it off. Yeah. And so I also subscribe, Joe, when you're trying to create this deficit, if you do want to cheat, if you do want to have that meal, you do want to have that fried chicken sandwich, those Buffalo Wild Wings, those fries, pay for it in advance. You're going to go 2,000 calories deep, row 2,000 calories, run 2,000 calories, hike 2,000 calories, like pay in advance, because you can create that deficit through exercise too. But again, now you're suffering, because have you ever tried to burn 2,000 calories on a rowing machine?
Oh my God.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to burn 2,000 calories on an Airdyne or a Rogue Echo bike? Like, it is not fun. It is not easy. But again, it's that pain and that suffering. And that's what you're doing. You're either restricting your food or you're doing a bunch of extra cardio to make up that deficit or make up for the calories that you're eating. Like, that's the only way to do it. And I wish, again, I could tell you there was another way, but there are all kinds of rich, famous people that are trying to get that six-pack, and they can't get it.
Yep.
That's it. So thank you for listening to another episode of the Be Real Podcast. Go out, get yourself a good relationship with pain, learn to suffer a little bit, learn to say no, get some self-restraint, some self-respect. Read a book on discipline, dedication, consistency. I don't think I'm forgetting anything, Joe.
I think we've covered it.
We have covered it. Till next time.